Welcome to Toni Unleashed, the podcast where we unleash the truth about all things pets.
Our research and anecdotal evidence matched with pet expert interviews will help you help your pet thrive.
We are here to answer questions, divulge information, and spread awareness about what's really going on in the world of pets.
I am your co-host, Emily Taylor, pet nutrition enthusiast.
And I'm Toni Shalasky, owner of Healthy Pet Products with 3 locations in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and recently expanded to Port Charlotte, Florida.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Toni Unleashed, the podcast. In this episode, we have an incredible guest to talk about the benefits of mushrooms for your pets. There are so many kinds of mushrooms out there, and every single one helps in a different way. And we're going to learn all about that. They support the immune system, respiratory and nervous system, and even have cancer-fighting properties. Today we have Joni Kamlet, RVT CCRA, there's a comma between those, Director of Veterinary Education and Practitioner Outreach for the company Real Mushrooms. They offer a variety of mushroom supplements for humans and for pets. So we're going to ask Joni the tough questions about mushrooms, like the importance of sourcing, production, processing, and more. We're excited to learn a lot from her today and hope our listeners will learn a lot as well.
Yeah, this is an episode that's been long overdue. The impact mushroom has on this industry is growing immensely, and as pet owners are seeing the benefits of this supplement, we want to help spread the word on how they might help your pet, even if you have a young, healthy dog. Mushrooms are a great preventative supplement as well. They're not just for sick dogs, cancer dogs, older dogs. I use mushrooms with my dogs and have definitely seen a difference. Absolutely recommend mushrooms to almost everyone. I'm really excited to learn more and gain more confidence in our ability to recommend them to customers and to talk about it with our listeners as well.
So what about cats? Cats can take mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All species, cats, dogs, birds,
Awesome.
pigs.
Awesome. Okay,
Snails.
so we'll get into that. So we're guilty of always just saying the word dogs, even though we preface it as saying we're talking multi-species. So Joni, welcome. If you don't mind, just let's give our listeners a little bit of your background and then company background.
Sure. So thank you for having me. It's really wonderful to be here. And I love that you know so much about mushrooms already. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. But just a little bit about my background. So yeah, I am a RVT, a Registered Veterinary Technician and a Certified Canine Rehabilitation Assistant. I got into veterinary medicine a long time ago, about 25 years ago, but I came to it in a bit of a roundabout way. In 1996, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and kind of out of the blue. And I was not living any kind of holistic lifestyle at all. I knew nothing about natural medicine, et cetera. They did surgery. They removed a giant 18 centimeter cyst that turned out to be cancerous. And for whatever reason, I turned down the recommendation of chemotherapy and radiation. Just didn't know, I just didn't want to do it. And that led me on my kind of path of trying to figure out what I was going to do to save my own life. At the same time, my dog was diagnosed with mammary cancer.
Wow.
I had a little skipper key named Waffles, and she had a little tumor on her one of her mammary glands. And so I kind of launched myself into, I tried everything, Chinese medicine, macrobiotic diet, herbs, you name it. I became a raw food vegan, doing everything. But, I'm here, 25 plus years later. And I started doing some of the things I was doing for myself. I started doing with my dog as well. And I found her. I started working with a homeopath. I found a homeopath, started raw feeding her back in 1996 when there were no raw pet foods back then. It was, very do-it-yourself. There was a pet food called Sojourner Farms. I think that was the only one out there. I think it came from England, and it was it's kind of a mix that you added added meat to and let it sit there overnight. But anyway, I'm still here.
Wow.
I still have everything intact, never did any Western medicine other than the surgery. And my dog, Waffles, she lived another 9 years.
Oh,
9 years.
Joni,
9
you are
years.
such an
And
inspiration. I had no
yeah,
idea that was your story.
yeah, and I was, I had been a bartender, I was
Yeah.
just living a very unhealthy lifestyle. And anyway, I like to say the cancer for me was one of the best things that had happened to me because it
Oh,
turned
I'm
me
gonna
around
cry.
completely. And I moved to California and I went to school to become a veterinary nurse, an RVT, specifically to go into holistic medicine. Didn't want to work with humans, but I was inspired by what was going on with my dog. So, so that's how I got into veterinary medicine, and I went straight to integrative and have been there ever since. I worked hands-on in integrative vet hospitals in California, and I went into rehab, and then I was hired by Standard Process, which is a whole food supplement company. And so I worked for them for over a decade, teaching veterinarians about nutrition, whole food supplements, herbs, etc. And then I left to work at another company that was using mushroom supplements. And I was going to be teaching veterinarians about mushrooms. And once I started to go down the rabbit hole of mushrooms, I just never looked back.
Wow.
I just realized that mushrooms were just the most important thing I'd ever, looked into.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're just at the very beginning of our understanding about mushrooms and all the therapeutic uses for them. And so I heard that Real Mushrooms was starting a veterinary line, the company I'm working for now, and that Dr. Rob Silver, was working as their formulator, and I talked them into hiring me. So
Wow.
here I am. Yeah, very happy to be here.
Wow. I want to talk to you for like 16 hours.
Yeah.
I know it's a long.
I'm coming to your house and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I went off the mushroom deep end.
I love it.
And as I told you guys before we started recording, I was living in California. I now live in Virginia. I own 5 acres of property. I've got 4 acres of it is wooded. I've got a creek on the property, and it's, I say the mushrooms truly made me do it. The more I learn about mushrooms, the more I want to learn. I'm interested in foraging and, mushroom hunting and cooking. I like to photograph mushrooms. And so,
Oh, you're fascinating. I love you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love you too.
I started raw feeding I think you have about 4 years on me.
Okay.
So I started in about 2001.
Oh, beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
wow. I had no idea that was your story. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And things are changing.
Yeah.
It's just so wonderful right now that there's so many options for pet parents out there and for veterinarians. Back then there were no veterinary schools teaching about integrative medicine. And, there are more and more veterinarians coming out of school with a knowledge of,
Thank God.
different integrative therapies. So,
Yeah.
we've still got a long way to go, but we are making progress.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have an episode just on that about your experience working with vets. And I mean, there's so much to talk
we're
about.
going to. If you're open to it, Joni, we definitely could do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's some of the stories I could tell you. Oh my gosh.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Wow.
Yeah.
So with you doing your whole life change move and wanting 5 acres to source your own mushrooms, maybe that's a good time to tell us what is the importance of mushroom sourcing? How does Real Mushrooms do theirs?
Yeah. So it's very important to know where your mushrooms come from. Well, any supplement or any food you eat, it's important to know where they come from. But mushrooms in particular, right now, as you all know, mushrooms are very hot, in the marketplace. the movie Fantastic Fungi came out and, ended up on Netflix. I think you can still watch it on Netflix. I highly recommend it, but it got a lot of people interested in mushrooms. There's a lot of clinical studies around, mushrooms and how, people live longer lives with less cancer when they eat mushrooms. The same actually goes for our animal population. And so there's a lot of companies out there that are making mushroom products, and it's really important to know what's in those bottles.
Mhm.
And so, when we talk about sourcing, I'll tell you our mushrooms, real mushrooms, we actually grow our mushrooms in China. And I know, and we're very transparent about that. And, I know in the veterinary community, sometimes saying that something comes from China can be a little bit scary.
Yep.
Because there were, about a decade, I guess it was about a decade ago, there was a big, kind of horrifying incident that happened with China, with melamine.
Yep.
And animals dying, et cetera. And so, I'm definitely aware of that. But the reality is that China's been growing mushrooms for thousands of years, and 85% of the world's mushrooms come from China.
Huh.
They, traditional, like in Asia, they've been using mushrooms, medicinally for much longer than we have. And the reason that we grow in our mushrooms in China, and we've been growing them there since the 1980s. So we're the retail side. Real Mushrooms is the retail side of Namex Mushrooms, which is the North American Medicinal Mushroom Exchange. And this is a company that was started by a man named Jeff Chilton, who was one of the first people to bring medicinal mushrooms to the United States.
Wow.
And he went over, he started out working on a mushroom farm in 1973 in the Pacific Northwest, met some Chinese growers that were there, ended up going to China, connecting with families and deep in the hills of rural China, and got them organically certified in 1996. So we're growing in China, we're growing in the traditional way, and then we get the mushrooms off every test you can imagine. They go through before they leave China. We test them again when they come here. But the reason that we do it, and it goes back to what to look for in a mushroom product, mushrooms are very hard to grow. They can take typically between 3 to 6 months, and that's under ideal conditions. And when I'm talking about a mushroom, I'm talking about the part of a fungus that you see that comes up above ground, like that, the typical
mushroom cap.
That typical shape that
Yeah.
you see, and often they call it the fruiting body. But actually, that what they call fruiting body is actually the only part of a fungus that's the mushroom. The mushroom has 3 parts. It has the spore, which is the reproductive part. It has the mycelium, which is the underground network that it's a very, very rich, full of wonderful nutrients, and is often called like nature's internet. That's the underground part, that's the mycelium, but the mushroom is the part that you see that comes up above ground. And in order for the conditions to happen for the actual mushroom to pop up above ground, it takes a long time. They need space, they need ideal conditions, and financially, it would be very challenging to grow mushrooms in the United States. So what is happening is that a lot of companies, rather than growing that mushroom, they take that spore, that reproductive part, and they inject it in a grain, what's called a substrate. It's either grain or rice. And then the mycelium, it's like little fingers. Imagine like little roots growing all through that rice or oats. And sometimes a few mushrooms will pop up, but sometimes not. But what happens is when that mycelium reproduces pretty quickly, and then what they do is they dry that block of mycelium with, very often it's oats. They dry it and they powder it and they call it a mushroom. And it's not a mushroom. It's what's called mycelium on grain, or in the industry we call it MOG. And it's
Wow.
and I'm not saying that there are not beneficial qualities to this. My issue with it is that, just say for me,
Yep.
it's deceptive to call this a mushroom. Like if you have a product and it's made this way, let people know, call it a mycelium on grain product or a mycelium product, and then explain the benefits. Don't call it a mushroom. And another thing is, a lot of these mushrooms in the marketplace, they don't even list the grain. They might say,
they don't.
I've looked at products that just say turkey tail reishi chaga mushroom. And then we've actually taken these products and we've analyzed them, and mushrooms should be high in beta glucans, which is it's one of the most beneficial, or the most beneficial component of mushrooms. It could be argued it's the most clinically studied component of a mushroom. There's over 20,000 studies on the beta glucans. They're immune modulating, they're anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, etc. A bottle, if you analyze it, should be high in beta glucans. Alpha glucans are starch. And so we actually did a study. We took 10 mushroom products that were labeled for veterinary use. And I did the online search for them, and I could not find 10 veterinary turkey tail only products. So we took 10 veterinary mushroom products that some of them had other mushrooms in them.
Sure.
And we blinded them. We covered up the labels, and we sent them out to an independent lab, and we had them tested.
Yeah.
And out of the 10 mushroom products, 6 of them were high in alpha glucans and low in beta glucans, which signifies that they're not mushroom. Like, if there is any mushrooms, it's a very small amount, and that there's a lot of starch in there. 4 of them were high in beta glucans, low in alpha glucans. 2 of those were real mushroom products. 2 of those were Namex products. So they're basically our mushrooms, just used in the formulation of another company. And many of these products that we tested did not even mention mycelium on the label.
Wow.
So, you have an animal that's on a ketogenic diet, maybe dealing with cancer, and they're trying to avoid grain. And,
Starch,
and they get that turkey tail product, which, because it's recommended for dogs with cancer, and they don't know it. And that's the thing that really is, when you're talking about sourcing, that type of thing, I would say buyer beware, and know what's in your mushroom product. If, the marketing could look really good, but, if the label on the bottle is kind of iffy, or you're not sure, or you want to confirm, email them. We get emails all the time, people asking like what part of the mushroom we're using. We have certificates of analysis that we share. Like I said, we're very transparent, and that's why we call ourselves Real Mushrooms, because there are so many mushroom products in the marketplace that aren't mushrooms.
So let's do the flip side of that. And tell us what all yours includes compared to that. So fruiting body.
Yeah, that's all we have in there is fruiting body, just the mushroom. There's nothing else in there.
So there's nothing beneficial coming from the mycelium. There's no need to have that in your product.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
There are many
benefits. So mycelium, there are a lot of benefits to mycelium, and certain mushrooms, in particular, like lion's mane. There are certain components in lion's mane mycelium that, in the next couple of years, I think there are going to be some very exciting pharmaceutical drugs that are going to be coming out, like that support memory and cognition, maybe, even for like things like paralysis, etc.
Yeah.
The thing is that when they make these pharmaceutical grade mycelial products, they're growing the mycelium in a liquid broth. They're not growing it on oats. So that's the issue. It's not the mycelium that's the issue. It's the fact that you cannot separate the mycelium from the substrate, that grain. And so
I follow you.
we
Yep.
don't want to sell that.
Sure.
I will say that right now in the Namex lab, we're experimenting with lion's mane mycelium. We're growing it in broth. If we ever did create a mycelium product, it would be like a liquid mycelium product and not a product like you would find in the marketplace.
Okay.
Even like I don't know if you're familiar with the turkey tail and hemangiosarcoma studies back in 2012. It's one of the reasons that mushrooms became so popular in veterinary medicine for cancer, is that there was a study done with turkey tail mushroom in dogs with hemangiosarcoma, and the dogs that were given high doses of turkey tail in the study had a much longer survival time than dogs that weren't, and got people very, very excited. It was a study that was done at the University of Pennsylvania. Well, that was done with a product called Immunity. It's a patented product out of China, and that's a mycelium grown in broth.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's an example of where a mycelium product, there's actually, there were actually 2 studies done on this product. Unfortunately, the second one that was done in, I believe, 2021 or 2022 did not have as overwhelmingly good results as the one that was done in 2012. The 2012 study was much smaller. Having said that, I would still, if I had a pet that had cancer, I would be using turkey tail in high doses. Our belief is that the whole mushroom, there just haven't been clinical studies on the actual, it's hard to say turkey tail fruiting body, but that's, because but that's what it is. There just haven't been studies done on that, and we hope to do that. We're working on that.
Great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, just like with anything, buyer beware. And because mushrooms are the new buzzword, we have lots of companies coming onto the market just to capture some market share.
Yes. And, the other thing you want to make sure with mushrooms, like we have mushrooms, our mushrooms come in capsules or in powder, but we don't just grind up the mushrooms. Okay. It's not like we grow mushrooms and then grind them up into a powder. Mushrooms are, they have something called chitin in them. All mushrooms contain chitin, which is the same thing that makes up the skeleton of an insect. And the medicine, the beta glucans, et cetera, are kind of, they kind of make up the structure of the mushroom. And the only way to get the medicinal benefits of mushrooms is to heat them up. So you have to heat that mushroom up in what's called like a hot water extraction to release the medicine. And so if you don't want to, first of all, you don't want to eat a raw mushroom. You also don't want to just eat a ground up mushroom. You want to eat you want to use a mushroom that's either been through hot water extraction. Sometimes they're what's called dual extracted, which is the hot water and then also alcohol extracted. That it gets different. One extraction method will get the beta glucans, another one will get certain triterpenes, et cetera. It depends on what you're trying to get out of that mushroom. And depending on the mushroom, it takes different extraction methods. But what happens is so imagine like when I'm talking about extraction, it's like making a cup of tea. You're doing an extraction. You put the tea bag in, the water turns whatever color, and then you drink that. That's a hot water extract. We put the mushrooms in the hot water. They cook for at the optimal temperature for a certain amount of time, and then we remove the mushrooms from the water. And what we do is we spray dry that water into a powder. And so that's what our powders are made of, which is the medicine that's been extracted from that mushroom. And then that liquid is turned into a powder. But then even better, because the actual mushroom is full of fiber, it's a great prebiotic, et cetera. And who knows, in Whole Foods, like there's unknown things that we haven't even identified that could be in that mushroom that we just don't know to extract. So we add that leftover mushroom that we took out, which is called the mark, we add that back in. So you're getting the concentrated mushroom that's been spray dried, and then you're actually getting the fiber back in as well. So again, just going back to sourcing, you just want to, these are the questions to ask. How are have the mushrooms been extracted? What's the extraction method? Where do they come from? Have they been third-party tested? Do you have a certificate of analysis? Mushrooms are metal absorbers. So, another thing, if the mushroom is, some people think wild harvesting is the best way to do it. And I'm not saying wild harvesting is bad at all. You just have to know, well, where are they being harvested? Is there pollution there? Is it, what are they absorbing from what they're growing in?
Sure.
So, yeah.
So in terms of, mushrooms and why and how they're so effective and so helpful to the body, is the beta glucan almost like their DNA? Does every mushroom have different beta glucan elements to it that target different aspects that are helpful to different aspects of the body?
Yeah. In a way, all mushrooms contain beta glucans. And, it's funny, I've been talking about mushrooms for years. I still get tripped up on the science part of it. So I'm going to put it into the terms that helped me understand how mushrooms work and how the beta glucans work. If you think about mushrooms, which are like mushrooms and fungus, the kingdom fungi, so mushrooms have their own kingdom. There's the animal kingdom, there's the plant kingdom, and then there's kingdom fungi, which is the oldest kingdom. And so these were the first inhabitants of Earth. And it took those organisms, human, plant, etc., that were able to tolerate the pathogenic, things were there's a lot of poisons going on back then, and it was those things that were able to build defense mechanisms in order to, either recover from those pathogens or evade those pathogens that ended up evolving, and move forward to modern times. Our DNA still remembers that. So when we ingest a mushroom, or when an animal ingests a mushroom, and the beta glucans are part of that, that interaction and that communication between the mushroom and the body. And so when we ingest the mushroom, the body goes on into not hyper alert, but becomes vigilant. And it has this memory that this could be pathogenic. And so it becomes more vigilant. And I liken it to like when the soldiers are asleep in the army and reveille plays. And so they get out of their beds and they make their beds and they get the hospital corners and they get dressed in their uniform and they shine their shoes and they're all lined up. So there's not a threat, but there could be. And if there's something happens, they are ready to go. And that's what mushrooms, when we take mushrooms on a daily basis, it primes our body to that potential threat, even though the mushrooms we're eating are not threatening.
Oh, wow.
So that's really how mushrooms work. And it's a pretty amazing. And different mushrooms have affinities for different parts of the body. For instance, cordyceps mushroom, which is like the zombie mushroom that in The Last of Us, they're not going to take over humans, by the way. But cordyceps is a great adaptogen, but it also has an affinity for the lungs and for the kidneys. So cordyceps would be great for cats, for instance, with kidney issues.
Yeah.
But lion's mane has an affinity for the brain, the nervous system, etc. So they all have beta glucans, but they also have, certain mushrooms have different triterpenes and other healing aspects to them, depending on the mushroom, and that might affect different parts of the body or support different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I know. This is what happens to me.
This is.
I hope that made sense.
Total.
The way I described
Total.
it.
Yeah.
It's just.
It is. it is such great information, and
Yeah.
I am so glad because you found us, right?
You know what? What happens is we have real mushrooms. They have I just show up. I just get an email.
Yeah, there's
And
a
they
woman who
we'd
connects you
like you to
guys
be
with
on this
everyone.
or that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Okay.
I do a lot of these podcasts. Some I do with Dr. Silver, and some I do by myself.
Yeah.
He's awesome. If you can, if you can ever get him on, he'll go into the deep science of
Right.
it.
Right.
And I'm kind of I just like to explain it in terms that I can understand, because
Right.
I'm not, I just love mushrooms and I know they work, and I want to be able to explain them in a way that
It's approachable
just
and
anybody can
yeah.
understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do we want to touch on real quick the different mushrooms that you guys offer and what part and how they help the body? I mean, we kind of covered cordyceps and lion's mane. Do we want to talk about turkey tail, reishi?
Sure. Yeah. So reishi is a very interesting mushroom. I didn't know a whole lot about reishi when I first started working for Real Mushrooms, and it's quickly becoming one of my favorite mushrooms. Wonderful. It's one of the most studied mushrooms out there. One of the things I love about reishi is that it's great. First of all, it's for humans. It's great to help you sleep. Reishi has been used by thousands of years by monks in Asia. It's to support meditation.
Oh.
But we use it for calming for dogs. So we have a product called our Mushroom Relax Chews that has lion's mane and reishi in them. Both of those are very kind of support calming and behavior issues. Reishi also has some antihistaminic qualities. So
allergies.
For allergies, I would even use it for a dog with mast cell issues because it has some support for that. One of the challenges is while there's a lot of clinical studies on mushrooms in general, there's not a whole lot of veterinary studies. So a lot of the information we're going on is anecdotal.
Sure.
But reishi is an excellent mushroom, although it is the most bitter of the mushrooms. So it's not a mushroom, for instance, I would give to a cat.
Okay.
It's just taste wise, not going to be ideal. Turkey tail, we talked about a little bit before, but turkey tail really is the mushroom that I would recommend most for any kind of cancer.
Yeah.
And what they're finding is that the higher the dose, the better.
Yeah.
One thing that's important to remember about mushrooms is they're basically functional foods. We eat mushrooms. Of course, there's mushrooms out there that are poisonous, and that's unfortunately why there's in the veterinary community,
Stigma,
among veterinarians,
almost.
There's a mycophobia, which for good reason. So that's the only experience they've had with mushrooms is when a dog eats a death cap, an Amanita phalloides, and ends up in the emergency room. But turkey tail, mushrooms in general, you can't overdose on mushrooms. You can cause gastric distress, so you don't want to upset an animal's stomach. And of course, anything can cause anything. So an animal can have an allergy to a mushroom, just like they can have an allergy to anything. But overall, mushrooms are generally very safe. And so they can be used in conjunction with chemotherapy and radiation. In some cases, there's some studies showing that they support by not only protecting the body, but in the case of reishi, for instance, it can support actually bringing the chemotherapy agent into the cells while also protecting the cells.
Oh, wow.
So how cool is that?
That's so cool.
Yeah. But and then my favorite, if I can just talk about lion's mane a little more, because I think it's a pretty compelling story. When I mentioned earlier that I started working for a company that was making mushroom supplements, and I had to learn about them. Well, we were making a lion's mane product. I was working not for Real Mushrooms, but for a different company, and we were making lion's mane product, but we were using the Namix mushroom extract. So I was working with the same mushroom. But I had to start teaching my veterinarians that I'd been working with for so many years about how to use this mushroom. So I was studying it. And I read a clinical study about the ability of lion's mane to support the regeneration of the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath is
Wow.
what kind of covers the spinal cord.
Yep.
And because of my background in canine rehabilitation, there's a disease called degenerative myelopathy that is very common in
horrible disease.
German Shepherds and Boxers and Corgis. And,
Yep.
you know, they're doing a lot of, they're trying to figure out like why it affects these certain breeds. And basically the myelin sheath starts to wear away and an animal will start knuckling, you know, walking on the tops of their feet with their, it starts that way and they become incontinent, fecal, sometimes urinary, and it slowly moves up their body. And so I had worked with so many of these dogs with DM, and
it's heartbreaking.
Just heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
They're always the nicest dogs and
Yep.
the nicest humans that are caretaking them.
Yep.
So when I read the study about lion's mane and the ability to potentially support the myelin sheath regenerating, I was like, oh my goodness. And so when the product came out, I gave it to all my rehab vets. I'm like, give this product to your DM dogs, you know, let me know what they say. And so they, you know, they did what I asked, and I checked in with them a month later, and the feedback was, honestly, the feedback on the DM was mixed, which I wasn't surprised by, because if anyone has a DM dog or has worked with DM, it's kind of an up and down disease. A dog will seem to be doing well for a couple days and then will set back, and there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. But what was overwhelming was that all of the pet owners wanted to keep the product because they noticed the cognitive abilities of their dogs had improved. And these DM dogs were all older, you know, because it happens like around 8 to 10 years of age, and especially in the larger breed dogs. And so those are elderly dogs. And what they were saying was that the dog's cognitive function was better. And specifically things like the dog was finding the dog door where it hadn't been able to find the dog door for months.
Wow.
The dog was initiating play, like picking up toys where it hadn't shown any interest, wasn't vocalizing at night, like dogs, you know. So doggy dementia is a thing, you know, canine cognitive dysfunction. And just like humans, there's something called sundowning. As, you know, as it moves into evening, the symptoms can increase. So they were noticing a decrease in those types of symptoms. They were finding their way around the furniture. I mean, just so much feedback. And I ended up doing a study group with these vets. I called them all together, and I'm like, I kept saying to them over and over again, you mean all of you are telling me this? Like every one of you has a patient.
Wow.
That, you know, because these people, they didn't want to give the product, they wanted more of the product. Like they were all like, we want more of this stuff. So that was my gateway. Lion's mane was my gateway mushroom. I'm like, wow, if this mushroom can do this, what can these other mushrooms do? And that's really what took me down the rabbit hole. And I ended up speaking at AHVMA last year on this very subject, lion's mane and cognitive dysfunction. And I told this story. And I would say for anybody that has an older dog, or really any dog. I mean, my dog is, you know, I've got a young dog. I give lion's mane every day.
Wow.
But there's like no downside to it. Lion's mane was traditional. It's interesting because lion's mane is kind of a new mushroom as far as in the medicinal realm. It's quickly become our most popular mushroom on the human side. But for the longest time, they didn't know how to cultivate it until recently. And it's very rare to find in the wild. So they finally have figured out how to cultivate it, and we grow it on sawdust on these like kind of long blocks. It's very cool, and harvest it in these big baskets. But traditionally, it was used to support the gut for ulcers and IBD. It's only been recently that they've discovered the effects on neurologic function, cognitive function. So if I had a dog with any type of neurologic issue, paralysis, I'd use it. I'd try it for epilepsy, definitely for cognitive function, but also just for any kind of digestive disturbance as well. And it's a very mild mushroom. It's kind of a mild tasting mushroom. So it's also a mushroom I'd recommend for cats. And it's calming.
Wow.
So Yeah,
How about
that's lion's
what
mane.
about any have you done any anecdotal research or gathered any anecdotal um, references on preventative care with lion's mane in these breeds that experience this disease, or with mushrooms and preventative care in general? I mean, I know that has to be
Yeah,
incredibly hard to do.
not right. Yeah, not that I know of. That would be a great thing to do. And, maybe as we move forward and more veterinarians start to use mushrooms, that can happen. It's so hard to do a clinical study.
Mm-hmm.
It's so expensive. Unfortunately, on
Mm-hmm.
the natural health side, like we don't have
Right.
the
Right.
deep pockets that the
Right.
We
pharmaceutical
tell people
companies
that
have.
all day long.
So,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, but I will tell you that that's why
Mm-hmm.
as I was saying earlier, the lion's mane mycelium shows great promise for all these things that I'm describing. And I, I bet you very soon there are going to be some pharmaceutical drugs coming out to support these things I'm describing using lion's mane mycelium. But they did just really quickly, one of the studies that I really liked that I read that I presented at AHVMA, it was a small study, but it was very powerful. They fed lion's mane. They made a lion's mane soup. So they used the actual lion's mane, the
Mm-hmm.
mushroom fruiting
Oh,
body,
it's
which I don't know if
beautiful.
you've seen.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like a big brain. Yeah. So they chopped it up and they cooked it up into a soup, and they fed it to
Oh,
these
wow.
elderly people. It was it was either in China or Japan. I can't remember offhand, but who were early stages of dementia, and they ate the soup every day for I think 6 weeks. And by the sixth week, some of them were like able to sit and eat dinner at the table with
Wow.
their families where they were
Yeah.
bedridden before, and if anyone who has a family member with
Oh.
cognitive
Yeah.
dysfunction, I
Oh.
mean, that's huge. But the interesting thing was that when they stopped the study, about a month after
They
they
declined.
stopped taking the lion's mane,
Yep.
they had declined. So lion's
Wow.
mane is something that you would want to, if you do have an animal that has any type of cognitive dysfunction or a family member, it's something you
Wow.
want to do lifelong. Yeah, and I think all people. I think you mentioned earlier about proactive mushrooms, that they don't just have to be for illness. I think all people and all animals should be taking mushrooms
Wow.
on a daily
Yeah.
basis. And those people that do, of course, the dogs and cats can't tell us, but the humans I've talked to, and from my own personal experience, you just feel different. You feel like a vitality and like a
Yeah.
vigilance to your immune system by taking
Yeah.
mushrooms daily. So I call
Yeah.
them like
Yeah.
insurance.
Oh, Joni, I am so in. I can't even begin to tell you. Um, so, and we have you have just opened up so much, and we definitely want to. We like to keep our episodes like 30 to 40 minutes because we like to
Yeah,
keep
absolutely.
everybody listening and really short and to the
Sure.
point.
Yeah.
But I really want to have you back on if you're willing. And what I'd
Oh,
love to
absolutely.
do
Yeah.
is, since we don't already carry your products, we now absolutely are carrying your products. So even though we talked about each mushroom, I want to talk about each product specifically maybe next time that
Yep.
we're going to bring in.
Sure.
And also, since you
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
a human line, why don't we
Yep.
even I know, well, maybe you can recommend for me what I should take. I have Lyme disease.
Sure.
I'm 55
Yeah.
years old. Um, but we could get into that off of
Yep.
this, and I could even,
Yeah. No.
offer some feedback anecdotally with me starting to take the product as well.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that. And what I can do, I'm going to send you guys a poo-poo platter
Oh,
of samples, uh, including we have
get
mushroom
it.
hot chocolate. And that's for the humans, not the
that's
dogs
awesome.
and cats. But it is yummy. So yeah, I'll be sure to send you some hot chocolate as well. But I'll send you when we get off, we'll make sure
For
you
sure.
share your address with me, and I'll send you guys samples to start trying. Yeah.
The one question I had, and I just put this on there just from personal experience.
Sure.
My dog was on prednisone, and I was told to not give mushrooms with the prednisone. Can you talk about that a little bit and why?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that came up in a chat with Dr. Silver over the past couple days as well. And the answer is we're not actually sure. There's no clinical evidence either way that mushrooms are going to be detrimental or support. And so what we decided was to err on the side of caution and to say if you're giving prednisone to not
I
give the mushrooms.
I noticed a difference. I almost noticed that I wasn't seeing the prednisone was almost not even there anymore.
Oh.
I noticed it almost immediately.
Yeah. The prednisone is like supposed to suppress things, and the mushrooms, they don't stimulate, but they modulate. And it's again, we never want to cause harm, and we actually Dr. Rob Silver, like, he poured through looking for different clinics, trying to find some evidence, and there really wasn't any either way, but there wasn't any like
don't do it
that said that it wouldn't be a problem. So yeah, it was somebody that had just emailed me about that, and so we ended up saying, you know what, just to be safe, while your dog's on prednisone, don't do the mushrooms, because God forbid, if something happened and it wasn't even related to the mushrooms, like, we're trying to be ambassadors. We don't want to give any reason to point a finger at mushrooms. So I would always, and then the other thing is I always recommend it. You do what your vet tells you to do, and if you have, if you are challenged by that or don't, then maybe look for a vet that kind of is more
in line with your thinking.
In line with your thinking. And there's a lot of vets that do telehealth if you're not in an area that there's an integrative vet. But we never want to tell you not to do what the vet says. They're the ones that have their hands on your pet and know your pet's history. Yeah.
What a fascinating conversation. I love it.
I know.
I love it.
I know.
Love it.
Sydney needs to listen to this big time.
We all need
everyone needs to listen to this.
Everyone.
I'm so glad this is recorded so that I could re-listen to
this. Agreed. So you're going to listen to this one? Because you haven't listened to any of the others.
Well, that's because Joni's talking most of the time. And I just want to hear what she has to say.
I listen to every episode because I critique and analyze the whole thing, and Em just can't do it.
It's hard to listen to yourself talk.
Yeah, I used to listen. I used to do Clubhouse, and we're going to start up doing a podcast with my friend Lee Carroll. But I would always re-listen to them because when I'm the one that's doing the interviewing, I've got so many other things going on that I don't really get a chance to listen to my,
exactly.
I want to learn.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So, and you catch things that, so anyhow, but I have to find something to give her a hard time about. So Joni, I can't thank you enough. What a fabulous conversation.
I feel like we only touched the surface as well.
When you were at the restroom, I already asked her to come back on, and we are going to, I think next time, talk more specific about each product that they carry, because we're absolutely going to sell them in Healthy Pet Products now.
Yeah.
And then I think Joni and I are even going to talk off camera and decide what I should take, and we can even maybe talk about that.
Perfect. I love it.
So, yeah.
I feel like,
Your dog, by the way.
This is my dog on her lap.
I taught him this. That's my bad.
Yes, I do not enable.
I do.
She enables.
He knows what chair he can sit on.
You're
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
Good
exactly. So,
love it.
Joni, stay with
I love
us,
it.
but we're going to thank our listeners for tuning in and can't wait to share more information on mushrooms and talk to you next time. Thanks. Yay.
My pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank
Joni.
you so much for having me.
We want to give a big shout out to our sound engineer, Brad, from Beacon Sound Systems, LLC. This is the highest quality sound editing, and he knows exactly what to edit. So it's his fault the F-bombs are still in there. You can reach Brad for all your sound editing needs through
Instagram and Facebook. You'll follow at Beacon Sound Systems. Website, www.4beaconsound.com. Phone number, 724-471-2410.
Beacon Sound is a locally owned company in our neck of the woods here in Pittsburgh, PA. So if you're in need of large LED screens, stages, lighting, or sound systems for any occasion, big or small, this is the company for you.
Sounds like a party in one.
And boy, do we need one.